Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our 2 games is 2020's Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the massive culmination of the franchise's more recent open-world RPG design, set in the historical context of the 9th century Viking expansion into the British Isles.
Following that is the story of a young man spending a week in the island town where his grandfather grew up, trying to solve the mystery of the magical armband gifted to him, 2020's Embracelet.
Surprisingly, quite a few things in common with these 2 games here on Ragnarok Week. These games both, at the very least, begin in Norway, and Norway is also where both of these composers that we'll discuss are born. So that's pretty neat. Also, these games are both released in 2020, so there's that as well.
Yeah, that's 2 more things than I thought there would be. I choose to believe this is also partially a called shot on my part because I've had Embracelet on this date for a while. And hey, I picked the Norwegian game for the week that Ragnarok's coming out on accident.
I kind of had the same thing. Well, I picked it more when the release date got finalized for Ragnarok. I'm like, well, we can't talk about God of War 2018. Why not talk about a game that was compared to God of War at the time for Norse reasons? We'll get to that. I have a lot to say about Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that's for sure. Joe, welcome back. Had the week off because your voice was pushed a little too hard on the previous episode. My apologies. I'm so sorry. How are you doing? What are you playing?
I don't know if it was the episode in general that did it. I think it was going to happen either way. There's a video of me actually, when it was almost at its worst, trying to say the date, and it didn't go well. It was bad. I could not speak for over a week. But I've been doing pretty all right. Otherwise, I finished playing a game called Ghost Song, like last night. It is a Metroidvania, came out yesterday at time of recording, and I really, really, really liked it. It's basically What If Metroid, but Hollow Knight, but Metroid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very good. Might be one of my favorite games of the year so far. Had a great time with it. And I also, like literally right before we finished recording, got to the point where Yusuke joins you in Persona 5 Royal, which I've been playing on Switch, which has been a good experience. And also because of the way my brain is broken and how cathartic it is, I've been following a guide for Max social links. So,
oh yeah, fun.
That'll be fun as it goes. But that's essentially it. Matt and I started It Takes Two, but we're only a couple hours into what is apparently an 11-hour game.
Yeah, it is that long. I think that's kind of what has me a little hesitant to start it as well eventually. But yeah, it's a beefy co-op game.
Yeah, it seems really long for like a linear 2D platformer, but I mean, so far it feels good to play. So Matt and I are finally getting that divorce we've been talking about for years, and I look forward to talking more about it later.
Who's the wife?
Matt is the wife. I've been playing the husband, which sucks because I hate him. He's a terrible character, and I want to throw him into a lake.
Good to know. We'll be interested to hear more of your experiences with that game. Because God of War Ragnarok comes out tomorrow, I've been accelerating my playthrough or my replay-through of God of War 2018 to kind of have that be fresh, both on a gameplay and narrative perspective. And I've beaten it. I was doing some extra world cleanup just before we were recording here. So I was about halfway through Muspelheim. You can unlock a couple realms throughout the game, and they're totally optional. I think they're just kind of battles in a way. Like this one, Muspelheim, this World of Fire, is basically just horde mode, throwing multiple waves of enemies at you and battle challenges. And I think Niflheim, if I remember correctly, because I didn't play it in my original playthrough, I didn't go through those realms. I think it's set up a kind of roguelike-esque. So I will have to get back and play some more. Like, maybe do I try taking on the Valkyries? Because I don't think I even did that the first time around. So I'm really enjoying it and definitely refreshing myself before Ragnarok, which, as of time of recording, reviews just came out. And pretty much everyone's saying it's just as good, if not better, as the first. So I'm excited.
Yeah, reviews are looking really good. I think I found one of the Valkyries when I played, and then got my butt thoroughly handed to me really, really fast, and had one of those moments of like, maybe not. All right, you have your space. Bye.
Yeah, it's definitely a case of, all right, set up the warp point right to them and save it for the very last thing you do. All right, let's talk about some composer follow-up news. We've got a few headlines here as we like to kind of keep tabs on what the different composers we've talked about over the weeks on this show. What are they still doing? How does that tie into video game news and headlines? There was a video interview with Tomoya Otani that recently came out, and we talked about him on episode 76 of the show for his work on Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. That's because Tomoya Otani is the composer on Sonic Frontiers, and that game is out today. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with reviews, because I think the embargo on that one is like the day before release. So if you're listening to now, you probably know what critics think of it, but we don't yet. And it's just weird to see the PR that also goes out with that game about like, what this game is nothing like Breath of the Wild. What are you talking about? You can admit that you took inspiration from it. It's okay. You can state how the game's different, but it's strange to hear the backpedaling. Like it's an open zone game. It's nothing like Breath of the Wild. Okay, all right.
And if you're listening on day of release, and it's early enough, hey, Matt and I are doing a Sonic Frontiers stream tonight.
Ooh.
Because Matt wants to do a launch day stream, and so we're taking a break from Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, where we spent the last stream looking for the level for 45 minutes, and we're playing Sonic Frontiers, and so I guess I'll see firsthand how the game is.
I guess by proxy you're going to have a better time at least then, that's for sure.
Oh, probably. I've been having a great time with Sonic Boom. I can't say the same about Matt, and I assume Frontiers will be more of the same. Meanwhile, 2 years ago, I want to say in 2020, during an indie direct, they announced that Finding Paradise was coming to Switch. Like, it was in the ending montage of upcoming games. And then we never heard anything about it again. Finding Paradise is, of course, the To the Moon sequel that we talked about back in episode 140. With music by Kan Gao, whom we talked about for his work on To the Moon in episode 51. Well, we finally have a release date. Finding Paradise will be dropping on Switch on November 18th. Finally, it's about time. I don't know if I will play it day one, but I'm sure probably going to buy it day one, because I will give Kan Gao all of my money until he proves that I shouldn't.
Now it's time for Imposter Factory. Chop, chop, get to it.
Let's do it. I will buy 2 copies of that one. To the Moon on the Switch is the only limited run game that I have bought. So I have a physical copy of that game. So if that happens with Finding Paradise, that might be the same. And Imposter Factory, that will be the same.
A couple months ago, Return to Monkey Island launched, I believe it was on Switch and PC. Well, it was just recently announced that it is available today as of this episode's release. It's available on Game Pass. I guess it's also on PlayStation 5, I guess, if you want to pay direct money to own a copy. But if you have Game Pass, give Return to Monkey Island a shot. We talked about one of its composers, Michael Land, on episode 192, just recently when we talked about The Secret of Monkey Island. So that's a nice little Game Pass edition. I like that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna try it. Me and point-and-click adventure games in the style of Monkey Island have not gotten along. Like, I've played the original Monkey Island with a guide open on the other screen, but that's really it. And I don't think I'm personally not in a hurry to play Return to Monkey Island, but I've heard very good things from people that do like those kinds of games. So if you are into that, hey, give it a shot. Following that, though, God of War Ragnarok, like we mentioned, it's out tomorrow, with a soundtrack by Bear McCreary, whom we talked about all the way back in episode 198 episodes ago. Oh, God. But yeah, it's, like you said, getting damn good reviews so far. I have seen people say what I kind of figured was going to be the case, being that it's the one that's going to be able to stand toe-to-toe with Elden Ring in terms of Game of the Year stuff, and I think it's probably going to be split down the middle for both of them, honestly. But like, I don't think there's any release this year that's going to be able to stand toe-to-toe with Elden Ring, except for Ragnarok. So, interested to see how that turns out.
It does make me super excited that it will at least stand with it, and I think then it just depends on like what your game preference is. When whoever's voting on these, like, how do you like your games to be experienced? Is it more about the combat and the thrill of victory, or is it a guided narrative experience also with solid gameplay? Like, it's gonna be what you prefer in games, and I can't wait to see what shakes out. All right, I have a lot to discuss about this game. As we talk about Ragnarok and Norse mythological things, let's talk about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the 12th major installment in the Assassin's Creed series, and it's the successor to 2018's Assassin's Creed Odyssey. As far as other Assassin's Creed games we've talked about on this show, discussed Syndicate in episode 10, Assassin's Creed 2 in episode 32, Black Flag in 75, and Origins in episode 151. Assassin's Creed Valhalla released November 10th, 2020 worldwide for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, PC, and rest in peace, Google Stadia. It also released for the launch of PlayStation 5, which was November 12th in North America and 19th in Europe. The game is developed by Ubisoft Montreal, with additional work by 14 other Ubisoft studios. So, won't name those, but there's a lot there. And of course, it's published by Ubisoft. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a third-person open-world action-adventure stealth game with RPG elements. It concludes a trilogy of Assassin's Creed games, being 2017's Origins, as we've previously discussed, and 2018's Odyssey. And this trilogy of games opts for a level-driven, loot-rewarded, Witcher-like open-world experience, as well as combat that shifts from a Batman Arkham-like counter-streak system, like the previous games had, to more of a Soulsborne-inspired dodge, parry, strike mechanics, that kind of thing. The emphasis in this game in particular was to bring back some traditional Assassin's Creed social stealth gameplay elements from the earlier games in the series, with the use of the hidden blade weapon and eagle vision to identify targets on the ground. You could also hide on benches, hide in crowds, kind of use those methods to plan your assassinations. The historical context, because all Assassin's Creed games have one, this one is the Viking expansions into the British Isles in 9th century AD. And the overall structure of this game, like what's framing the whole experience, it's really all about building out your base of operations that is called Ravensthorpe in a new land. Like, you're starting fresh in this new land and you have to make a name for yourself, and everything is driven towards that. So the main quests in the game, the narrative structure is a little different compared to most Assassin's Creed games, most games even, because the main quests are broken down into arcs. And these are multi-pronged story chapters that ultimately will involve you forging alliances for Ravensthorpe in a specific part of the British map. The British map is kind of broken out into these chunks, and they're all recommended levels, so there's like a kind of path that you should take through them. But yeah, once you commit to one area, boom, you're starting this arc, and so that's like your main quest line that you're working on at the moment. And when you're done, you move on to the next one, the next higher map leveled section. It's a lot of comparisons to like episodes of a TV show were kind of made at the time, and I think that's pretty fair. You're working on the Yorkshire arc, say, things like that. So during main and side quests, you'll defeat enemies, you'll rescue prisoners, you'll collect items or investigate items of interest. But in your spare time, you can raid monasteries for supplies to upgrade your base, you can hunt members of a cult, get into poetic rap battles, play a Gwent-like dice game, chug ale and drinking games, and many, many more side activities. Get experience points, level up, fill out a skill tree, collect and upgrade a variety of rare weapons and armor as loot. You also have your eagle partner in this game like you do in Origins and Odyssey, but this character takes more of a back seat since you can highlight targets on the ground with eagle vision with clicking the right stick. That's more of how you kind of identify the things around you, as opposed to Origins and Odyssey, where you're going up to the bird and scoping things out and marking things on the map automatically that way. So it's a different way of going about it. The bird is still helpful for, say, if you're like in an area of investigation, the bird can kind of help get you closer to where you need to be so that you can use eagle vision and hone in on it. So it's just a different shift in priorities for navigating the world in this Valhalla game. The plot of Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a bit tri-pronged in a way. It's trifold. I'm going to do the best I can to break this down simply and set up the structure, so do forgive me. In 855 CE in Norway, a young Eivor Varinsdottir witnesses a warlord sacking her hometown and killing her parents before she is rescued by Sigurd, the son of King Styrbjorn of the Raven clan. When she recovers her father's axe 17 years later, Eivor experiences a vision of the Norse god Odin, which leads to another prophecy of Eivor betraying Sigurd, with the adoptive brother losing an arm before being consumed by a giant wolf. When Sigurd returns home from a raid with foreigner Basim ibn Ishak, a member of the Hidden Ones, Eivor learns the ways of assassination, as the Hidden Ones have come to Norway to deal with this warlord that killed Eivor's family, who was a member of the opposing Order of the Ancients. After Styrbjorn pledges fealty to a new king that seeks to unite Norway, Sigurd realizes that there is no longer a crown to inherit from his father. So Eivor joins Sigurd and Raven clan loyalists in setting sail to England, where they will make a new name for themselves in their established town of Ravensthorpe. By forming alliances with local Viking clans and Saxon kingdoms, Ravensthorpe's notoriety grows, and Eivor discovers more members of the Order of the Ancients in her quest for revenge, fueled by Odin's subconscious consultations and following tip-offs from a poor fellow soldier of Christ. As Eivor helps to lead Ravensthorpe while Sigurd and Basim are away on a quest, a wrinkle emerges when Sigurd returns and believes himself to be a god, challenging the prophecy regarding if Eivor will betray her brother. If that weren't enough, Eivor's connection to Odin is explored further, with vision quests that have her dream of Asgard from Odin's perspective, hoping to avert his own fated death by Ragnarok. So Odin travels to Jotunheimer to retrieve a magical mead that will ensure his soul will be reincarnated. And if that weren't enough still, the game is bookended by the current-day storyline of Layla Hassan, the modern protagonist of Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey. In 2020, the unexplained strengthening of Earth's magnetic field is negatively affecting the planet. Layla, joined by familiar assassin faces Sean Hastings and Rebecca Crane, receive a mysterious signal with coordinates in New England, where they exhume a Viking raider named Eivor's remains. Layla, still struggling with the Staff of Hermes following the events of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, enters the Animus to view the raider's memories. Big questions overall here. Who is the Grand Master of the Order of the Ancients, which has its roots throughout England, and who is this poor fellow soldier of Christ? What is Eivor's true connection to Odin? Will Eivor ultimately betray Sigurd? And in the modern day, can Layla use Eivor's memories to find a way to stabilize the magnetic field and save the planet? All of that being said, Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Assassin's Creed Valhalla?
That's so much.
It really is. It really is.
Non-existent. I don't have any experience with Valhalla at all. Basically say the same thing for every Assassin's Creed game, so I'm kind of a broken record. I haven't played one since I beat 2, like 10 years ago. Probably longer than that. I was living with my mother when I played Assassin's Creed 2. That's how long ago it was. And yeah, I really just don't. I know of it, and I know I've heard you talk about it quite a few times back when you were playing it, but that's really all I got.
So yeah, as you suggested, I have played this game a whole lot. I am a big Assassin's Creed fan. I'm almost surprised that I've only brought it to the show as many times as I have. But with Valhalla in particular, it is such a long game that has had very, very long legs of content support to the point where I think I've put 130 hours in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which is great if you enjoy it and there's still a lot to do. I think I've even done maybe 2/3 of completion. There's so much in that game, but at the detriment of to those who are joining Assassin's Creed pretty new to the franchise, that bloat is real, and it is overwhelming how long this game is compared to what an Assassin's Creed game should be. So I have thoughts on this game, particularly spoiler thoughts, which I'll keep refrained and vague enough to the end of this section where we talk about what'll I never forget about this game. But it's more the fact that there's a lot to this game. If the plot weren't enough, there's a lot going on here. It's a good soundtrack. I wouldn't put it among the best Assassin's Creed soundtracks, but it is a game that is constantly in headlines for what they announce and roll out with it. And with Ragnarok Week here, a good game to talk about, I think. So, Assassin's Creed Valhalla began development around the start of 2018 with the Assassin's Creed Origins team at Ubisoft Montreal. While the start of the COVID-19 pandemic affected the end of development, employees were able to work remotely while polishing the end bits of the game, and this didn't affect things too significantly when it came to their targeted launch. The game's narrative director was Darby McDevitt, who was the lead writer for Assassin's Creed Revelations and Black Flag, as well as being the co-writer on Assassin's Creed Unity. He explained that Valhalla's story was written as a recap of all the prior Assassin's Creed games, connecting them in non-trivial fashions, but not intended to be the final game in the series. It's kind of perceived as a grand unifying theory for the franchise, while it also gets to be experimental with telling its story in arcs with the comparisons to episodes of TV shows and things like that. And if you've heard me on past Assassin's Creed episodes, you've heard me talk about how the story, at least like the main modern day story, like doesn't know what to do with itself. And I feel like at the end of Valhalla here, there is kind of a coming together and then pushing it in a specific direction going forward. So I think there was a lot to accomplish, and I think McDevitt did a great job with that. Creative director Ashraf Ismail cited Michael Crichton's 1976 novel Eaters of the Dead, which was itself a retelling of the epic poem Beowulf, as playing a major role in influencing Valhalla's setting. The development team recognized that there would be similarities to the God of War games, particularly God of War 2018, of course, with a planned Ragnarok sequel expected, but not confirmed by this time. But McDevitt felt that those games, quote, skew very heavily towards the mythology, whereas Ubisoft wanted Valhalla to be a more historically grounded experience. I get where he's coming from, but some of the steps that are taken regarding the Norse mythology are pretty out there as well and not that grounded.
Yeah, you mentioned Odin essentially being a playable character of some sort.
Yeah.
That's as not grounded as you get.
Yeah, when you take license with playing through the retelling of Norse myth and how it really happened, I don't know if you really get to say historically grounded. I guess in the context of, yes, Vikings in England, you can make those claims, but you start messing around with what Norse myths are really, not so much. So there's also something to be mentioned about Eivor's gender. Apparently, canonically, it is Varen's daughter with the last name there, so it implies that she is canonically female. I think the story also works a bit better this way too, and how it's framed and some of the twists that happen. But you can play through the whole game as one gender or the other. You can even change in between, like you can pause, go into the animus part of the menu and change your gender. Or there's like a third option to, quote, have the animus decide. And so your gender will change for you based on what the game thinks is best for the story at the time. Unfortunately, male Eivor gets the box art coverage because, video games. So that's unfortunate, but I do recommend playing through the game as a female Eivor if you get the chance. Ubisoft's 2019 title, Tom Clancy's The Division 2, apparently included an Easter egg in the form of a poster that appeared to tease the next Assassin's Creed game as Valhalla. The poster included an image of a Viking dressed in a similar fashion to an assassin of the series' previous titles and held what appeared to be an Apple of Eden, one of the Isu artifacts featured in the series. The Easter egg led Jason Schreier of Kotaku to report that there was a new Assassin's Creed title in development planned for release in 2020. Of course, everyone at Ubisoft, McDevitt, the people at Massive Entertainment, they're all like, it's just a coincidence, but I don't know about that. The game was officially revealed in April 2020 with the live stream that featured time-lapsed artwork by Boss Logic, and then followed that up with a trailer. I think by that point, everyone kind of knew through different Ubisoft leaks one way or the other that it was going to be a Viking game, but it was neat to see it confirmed. I do remember watching that artwork live stream. The game reviewed fairly well, with Metacritic averages ranging from 80 on PS4 to 84 on next-generation platforms. It received generally positive reviews, with praise for the narrative, the characters, the voice acting, the visuals, the soundtrack, the world design, and the interconnectivity of activities, while being criticized for its length, technical issues, and repetitive structure. I would say it is impressive open world comfort food, but these are totally fair issues. Like, the game is way too long, as I mentioned. Like, you could probably blitz through it, golden path it in like 40 hours. But my more thorough file with maybe like 2/3 full completion was like 80 hours. And that's like getting the main ending, and then you have all the DLC and everything on top of it, and that just adds the time. It was also very buggy at launch, and like the months after, lots of bugs. You try to put in a patch, and then new bugs pop up. So I think now it is good, but there were definitely some issues at launch, totally fair. And those arc chapters do really give a rinse and repeat on to the next one sort of feel, and that can get frustrating. One reviewer stated that Valhalla is daunting and messy, but it's also a pick and mix of all of the best bits from the series. They kind of note how it's not really a good entry point for the series, but it rewards diehard fans in a number of ways. There are no specific sales numbers available for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but there are some impressive figures nonetheless. Valhalla sold more copies during its first week of release than any other Assassin's Creed game, and the PC version also had the most successful launch of any PC game published by Ubisoft. It has generated over $1 billion in revenue, making it the most financially successful entry in the Assassin's Creed franchise, and the second most profitable Ubisoft game ever. They mention this figure in their sales disclosings, and they don't talk about what the first one is, so we'll just leave that up to interpretation. But it was just recently announced that, quote, over 20 million Vikings have embarked in their epic journey to Valhalla. Though this is certainly encouraged by the game coming to subscription services like PlayStation Plus. Assassin's Creed Valhalla was nominated for Innovation in Accessibility and Best Action Adventure at the Game Awards 2020. It was nominated for Best Narrative at the BAFTAs, and it was nominated for Outstanding Achievement in Character for Eivor and Adventure Game of the Year at the DICE Awards. It was also nominated for Outstanding Video Game at the 2021 GLAAD Media Awards, and it also earned 7 nominations for the Navigator Awards, including Game of the Year. Lots of nominations, but no big wins at these shows. The game has legs on its post-launch content, though. There were 2 paid DLC expansions promised at launch with the Gold edition of the game, and these would end up being Wrath of the Druids, which takes place in Ireland, and that was launched in May 2021, and then the Siege of Paris, which is in the Kingdom of Francia, and that launched in August 2021. There's been lots of free seasonal content with river raid modes, mastery challenges, holiday celebrations in Ravensthorpe, and also the educational discovery tour mode. This became the first Assassin's Creed game, though, with a second year of support, which started off in December 2021 with a free crossover mission featuring Odyssey's protagonist Cassandra. Assassin's Creed Odyssey would also get a mission with Eivor as well. There was another paid expansion that launched this year in March 2022, and that was called Dawn of Ragnarok. See, more Ragnarok, and this continued the Norse mythology storyline. It also randomly dropped The Forgotten Saga a few months ago in August 2022, and if you'll remember, this was a free roguelike mode that was basically like squeezing Hades into the context of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. It just insane. Finally, Ubisoft announced that The Last Chapter, a free expansion that will serve as a conclusive epilogue to Eivor's story, will release later in 2022, but we have no word on that release date yet. As far as the series' continuation and its legacy, before the Assassin's Creed Infinity live service hub with multiple games becomes a thing, the next main Assassin's Creed title goes back to its franchise roots, with simpler stealth mechanics. Assassin's Creed Mirage will be set in 9th century Baghdad during the Islamic Golden Age, and will explore the backstory of Basim ibn Ishaq, thus serving as a prequel to the events of Valhalla. It is targeting a release in the first half of 2023. Okay, there's a lot there, but there's also quite a bit here on the soundtrack to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and we've talked about the 2 main composers before, but there's a third one to this game, and his name is Einar Selvik. Einar Selvik was born November 18th, 1979 in Osterøy, Norway, which is a small inland island on the west coast of Norway, about 35 minutes away by car from Bergen. Einar Selvik is also known by his stage name Kvitreifen, or White Raven as it translates out to. He is a Norwegian musician known for being the drummer in the black metal band Gorgoroth from 2000 to 2004, and for fronting the Nordic folk project Vardruna, which formed in 2002. Selvik has also recorded with other projects, including Det Hedensk Folk, Bakdisiv Fjell, Jotunspor, Sag, Death to This World, and Fawn. Selvik and Vardruna's soundtrack work for the History Channel TV show Vikings has earned him international prominence, and he also appeared as an actor on the show. He became interested in pre-Christian Viking culture in his early adolescence after discovering an old book on runes. And he has an overall worldview where he says, quote, "I am a strong supporter of individual responsibility. No one died for my sins. This is a slightly pagan body of thought. The gods help those who help themselves. It mirrors that you are your own god, that it is your responsibility how you behave, what you contribute in this world." And I liked that. I thought that was really fitting and neat. You can follow him on Twitter at Einar Selvik1. That's EINAR SELVIK1. So his discography, obviously with the different bands that he's played for and composed music for, the main one being Vardruna. He has several album releases there, including Runeljod Gapvar Genunga in 2009, Runeljod Yggdrasil in 2013, Runeljod Ragnarok in 2016, Skald in 2018, and Kvitreifen in 2021. The main TV show he's known for working on is, of course, Vikings. And when it comes to games, of course, he composed for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where he also provided the in-game voice for the skald or poet Bragi. And he also did some music for League of Legends, where he composed the theme of the character Volibear. The soundtrack for this game involves music being composed by Sarah Schachner and Jesper Kyd, who we've covered both on this show before. Sarah Schachner for her work on Assassin's Creed Origins, and Jesper Kyd for his work on Assassin's Creed 2. And so, obviously, with their familiarity with the franchise, it helps to kind of bring them back, kind of mixing the newer music with the older music and kind of bringing it all together. It makes sense there. But, of course, since Selvik had written songs for Vikings, they decided to bring him in there for the Norse influence in Valhalla, and so just a great team there. For her tracks, Sarah Schachner drew inspiration from the archaeological book from Max Adams called The Viking Wars, War and Peace in King Alfred's Britain, 789 to 955. And look at that, that's kind of exactly when this takes place. This sparked ideas on how to musically emulate the Viking and Anglo-Saxon cultures, merging as the Norsemen were absorbed into an Anglo-Scandinavian society. She achieved this by relying on a mix of instruments from each region, such as the Scandinavian lyre known as a tagelharpa, and the Celtic carnix from Scotland, gradually foreshadowing that the two peoples join in their tracks. A Dane himself, Kyd was surrounded by exaggerated bits of Viking lore all his life, but he felt a need for Valhalla's album to look past the wild stories told and find the true history written down. He was particularly drawn to stories of life being cyclical, ending and restarting in flames, like the poetic Edda's Ragnarok cycle, which were written during times of climate instability. His score predominantly used winds and strings, which were then accentuated with the melody being played on metallic drums. Other contemporary instruments heard throughout the score include harps, Viking horns, bass flutes, and fiddles, all of which were blended with synthesizers and sounds from a mixing console. For both Schachner and Kyd, the score provided a chance to familiarize themselves with more exotic stringed instruments beyond their usual repertoire. Schachner acquired bass and alto tagelharpas and a plucked lyre, all strung with horsehair, while Kyd learned how to use the Eastern European rebech, the Welsh crwth, and the Mongolian Morin Kur. Boy, you sure get some attempts at pronunciation there from all parts of the globe. My apologies. All right, let's finally talk about the music for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I've gone on long enough about its development history, but there is a lot to say, a lot to talk about. And I feel like we have to start here on the Critical 5 for the game with Assassin's Creed Valhalla main theme. A really nice, dramatic sounding piece that ends up playing on the main menu screen. I wish I could include the whole piece because it was a really nice song to discover. You know, when this announcement of these composers coming together was announced, it was kind of paired with, and here's the main theme of the game. And I was just absorbed and really enjoy this. The piece actually starts out in a really interesting way with this melody of like da 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 da, like kind of on these strings and horns, and it's really soft and faint. The clip here is more of the building and the culmination of everything as the drums coming in. It's the vocals, both the low bass rumbling and then the higher, more alto, soprano kind of there. But yeah, this is everything kind of full bore for this piece. And so if you're hanging on the main menu for a while, you're really getting a sense of what's going to be presented to you. It's a pretty different theme compared to what you'll hear on the Critical 5 here. But when you're talking about you're starting your Viking saga and you're going to be loading up the game every time through this main menu, yeah, I think this is a great piece to play. Composed by Sarah Schachner and Jesper Kyd, with also Einar Selvik contributing some as well. And when writing the music, all three composers wanted this theme to evoke an atmosphere of uncertain mystery to reflect the hope of the Raven clan Vikings and Eivor as they left Norway in search of a better future in England, highlighting the intensity of emotion as the Voyagers' family bonds would be tested to the limit now that they had separated from the main group. So the yearning for adventure, the stress that entails, and just the billowing of excitement on your Viking adventure.
And not just, I like the vocals the best as well, but like there's also, alongside the higher and lower vocals, there's chanting at some point in the song, which also adds another air of like really cool, really epic sounding feeling to it.
It sure does, definitely. And I think it's also neat that when you're going into the main menu, like it kind of loads up and then it's like a, press X or press A to continue, and it'll then load some more as this song starts to play. But it's also neat that like as the quieter parts play in the beginning of the piece, when you hit that button to continue the menu loading, you get this kind of sound effect that comes in with like a metal striking sound. And it's just like, it really does a good job at really getting you in that Viking mood for sure. Number 2 here on the Critical 5 for Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a Jesper Kyd track. And this one is Out of the North. So yes, this one composed by Jesper Kyd, and it primarily plays in Norway at the beginning of the game. So fun time with me as I was anxiously awaiting playing this game on PlayStation 5 for that system's launch. I could not wait any longer, and so I just bit the bullet. I'm like, all right, I'm going to buy the game on PS4, use the free upgrade on PS5, carry over the save file, because Ubisoft was making a big deal about how they'd be able to do that. And so I started on launch day on PS4. Granted, the quicker loading times would be much improved on next generation with things like warping between the fast travel Eagle viewpoints and things like that. But yeah, I spent like 5-6 hours just enjoying this area of Norway before I even left. I'm like, I want to save the England part for next generation. But here I was messing around in Norway, hearing this piece a lot. And it turned out to be like one of the better tracks for sure, especially when the higher female vocals come in. That's definitely a big, like, you're syncing those viewpoints, the camera's spinning around, you're getting the majesty of Norway. A lot of blues, certainly, with a lot of ice and all there, but just gorgeous overall. And this piece really stands out at the start of the game. In Kid's research, he found that many of the music that claimed to be Viking inspired was too dark and pulsating, and this reflected how society still sees Vikings as no more than brutish warriors bent on violence. But by using metaphorically lighter instruments, Kid hoped to bring a sense of spirituality to Valhalla, reminding players of the bonds of family or the rugged majesty of the snow-capped mountains and fjords, as he tried to convey in this track, Out of the North. And it's just gorgeous. Wow, this one had to be here for me, absolutely.
I hear the song and I think about like a big, wide, wintry sort of landscape, which, I mean, Norway. That's what it I assume. I've never been. I'm so sorry, everyone. But that's kind of what I picture, especially, yeah, when the female vocalist comes in. It gives that sort of feeling of the wild, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And like just the land and stuff like that. So I don't know. That's the vibe I get from this one.
Yeah. And it's an area that you can explore pretty fully early on. You'll have to come back for a couple things, like to fight a polar bear. That's fun. But you eventually return back to Norway for the end of the game. So it's a good starting point and kind of a return point to kind of cap off the main adventure. Another track in this vein is number 3 here on the Critical 5, and this track is called The First Departure. This piece, composed by Sarah Schachner, definitely tones down the epic sounding feel, like with the vocals and the chanting and everything like that, but really hones in on the simplistic beauty of the world. And this plays when you are syncing viewpoints in England. And there are a lot of them. So you'll kind of get to hear this, that kind of big swell. You'll get to hear that quite a bit. Really neat to hear those horsehair strings at play. And then, yeah, when the flute comes in, it's just gorgeous with cello or bass, whatever it is, coming underneath. Sarah Schachner wanted this somber tune to give listeners the auditory sensation of Vikings drawn from a war-torn Norway to lucrative farmland here in England. And it's definitely a different vibe here for sure, but one that's filled with a simpler kind of majesty.
I think this is overall my favorite, at least so far. I mean, for obvious reasons, we've talked about how I like string pieces. That's just a thing that we've established in 198 episodes, I hope.
That and piano, yeah.
That and piano, those are the two. And acoustic guitar. Those are the 3. I'm not very unique. But I really, really, really dig this piece. Just because, you know, it speaks to the 4th grade orchestra player in my heart.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a nice one for sure. As we ascend into battle, though, the Viking chants pick up, and we hear this in critical track number 4 from Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This is Vigahugr, Lust for Battle. This is definitely a familiar melodic line if you've played through the game. Gets interpreted in different ways, but this track, I think, has a pretty good interpretation on it nonetheless. It is composed by Einar Selvik, and that is him doing the vocals there, speaking in Old Norse, which is pretty cool. You hear some of the different consonant enunciations there, like the rolling R's and things like that. Just fantastic. This music plays, I think, primarily in raids, but like I said, you're going to hear this da, 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 and then it kind of goes up to a different line of da, 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 da. You're going to hear that pretty throughout the game, even from your kind of crewmen on your little boat that you get to navigate throughout England's rivers. If you get them to sing you a song, it's one that'll kind of be a callback there. But yeah, what a good piece. It doesn't have the big bombast to it, but you get a foreboding sense of an epic scale here that is like just ready to explode. And it's something when you're raiding a monastery and setting things on fire and NPCs are screaming, help, help, help. And you're taking and you're pillaging, and yet this is just vroom, vroom, vroom under it. It's a cool feeling.
I will say the vocals actually kind of caught me off guard. I did not expect those in there. And also the fact that they are Einar Selvik himself. That's really cool. He's doing very good in this song. It gives it a very, very different feeling than what I expected when I saw the title Lust for Battle.
I feel like it wouldn't be an Assassin's Creed Critical 5, though, if we didn't include this piece. It is the take on the main theme that got put to prominence in the franchise. So number 5 here on the Critical 5. This is Ezio's family ascending to Valhalla. For Jesper Kyd to return to Assassin's Creed for the first time since, I believe, Revelations, so that'd be 2011, almost 10 years away, his Ezio's Family track from Assassin's Creed 2 became synonymous with the franchise, and a franchise that was looking for a main theme really found it in this da 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 da, as Joe, you will attest to having played 2. Like that's the Assassin's Creed theme. So for him to return to this game, I think very fitting for Jesper Kyd's piece to be adapted in a Viking Valhalla context, to use kind of the vocals that they've been using, the percussion, the instruments all at work here, gives it a nice sense of scale and the textures and timbres that have been kind of portrayed so far. I believe this is used in the credits. It's not really brought to prominence much else, but it's the end of the soundtrack. It's a fitting way to include Jesper Kyd's theme back in this game.
I mean, I'm always down for another rendition of Ezio's Family. That song is absolutely incredible, and I love it. And it's really the only one from Assassin's Creed 2 that I could still whistle and remember exactly how it went. And considering the fact that I played it over a decade ago and we talked about it, 3 years ago now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good piece, and I'm always down to hear different takes on it with different instrumentation from different sort of locales and historical periods and stuff. It's always really cool. And this is no exception.
Yeah, it's not the first time it's reused in the franchise, obviously. I particularly like the Syndicate take on it, but for Jesper Kyd to come back, you gotta give the man this one. It's worth it, and it's a good one for sure. I have a couple tracks on the cutting room floor. The first of these for me is another boat song, and this is When Horns Resound.
Hearken well in Hall of Kings. On ocean steed my words gain wings. Odin's mead I forth will bring. For noble deeds thine honor sing. The brave man slain.
Did you love the ship shanties in Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag? Well, you'll be lucky to know that, like they do in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, there are different boat shanties here. But instead of a big ship that's traversing the Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea and all that in Odyssey that has a big crew, you just kind of have this large canoe rowboat. And so you've got about, 16 Vikings or so with you. And you can have them strike up a song. You can also have them tell a story, too, as you navigate England's rivers and all. But I think this is the one that really stands out to me as the one melody that, kind of stands the test of all those hours of playthrough. Just starting with Hearken Well in Hall of Kings. And granted, the beginning of this clip here, it sounds, pretty simple with one singer and the lute there. But as the piece grows and as the song grows throughout the game, you'll get more people singing in, you'll get flutes coming in. It's a great piece for sure, and I think a way to represent the ideas of shanties continuing in Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
I'm glad the main thing they took away from Black Flag is that it's cool when a bunch of people on a ship sing a song. That's all I got. It's cool when a bunch of people on a ship sing a song.
And it's a good way to pass the time instead of, just focusing on rowing. Although, God bless, these games for at least putting the option on of just auto row. I've set my waypoint. Take me to my waypoint. Let me check Twitter as you do that. It definitely helps. The other one here on the cutting room floor is another epic scale song, and it's just a really neat piece. As the sea shanties are composed by Einar Selvik, so is this one. It is Hellride Odin's Ride to Hell. I think it's a lot of the same, big epic sounding battle sort of themes here with the percussions and everything going, and the strings and guitars and the big vocals. Another one composed by Einar Selvik, also him singing as well, but kind of getting more of the more than just one voice coming in, kind of singing a saga in a way. This is a neat one for sure. Plays in a few odd points in the game, one of these being the siege on Costa Castle in the Shropshire arc. So not a big key critical moment, but this da 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 da, the kind of rising action in that one, that definitely kind of just when a piece you hear and it's oh, that's a classic. I've heard that one before. This strikes similar feelings in me, and I feel like it was a good place to kind of round out the songs here on the cutting room floor.
For me, what stands out in this piece is the percussion. Something about it just feels really, really cool. Just the heavy, heavy drums in there. It's good. This is a little closer to what I expect from like a fight song, sort of. But yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, definitely a big battle kind of song for sure. What will I never forget about Assassin's Creed Valhalla? There will be much to remember as I think about Assassin's Creed games and the direction in which the franchise is going. To be still vague on spoilers, what happens at the end of the game is pretty crazy because there's like the interpretations of the Norse pantheon and how they are connected to the Isu, the people who came before in the Assassin's Creed lineage. There's also the implied transition from the Order of the Ancients, which is kind of the overarching antagonist of these three games, the Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla. But at the end of this game, it's kind of the implied transition into the Templars, the Knights Templar. So like this is the inflection point here, and that's pretty neat. There are insane lore connections to Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed 3. We hear what's implied to be Ezio's voice at one time in this game, and it's bonkers. There is also the modern day story direction, what they decided to do with it, how that may hopefully be explored further in Mirage. Definitely looking forward to how they've kind of synthesized everything going on with Assassin's Creed, try to pull it together and push it in a new direction. Should be very exciting.
I will never forget that somehow, for some weird reason, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, during its sort of marketing phase, had a crossover with the manga Vinland Saga, which is a manga about Vikings. And I don't read Vinland Saga, and I didn't watch the anime either. But the idea of a manga / anime crossing over with a Western video game is really, really weird. And just learning about the existence of that's probably what I'll never forget.
Yeah, I think that may be because Eivor at one point on an optional side mission, you can go to Vinland or America and interact with the Native Americans there, and lore implications there abound. Yeah, that's wild. Did not know that, but makes sense. Makes sense. So to transition to our next game, after all that I've talked about with this game, because there was plenty, we'd like to highlight a fan cover, a fan remix, whether it's on OC Remix, YouTube, wherever. For me, When Horns Resound stands out as an easy song for fans to cover. And Colm McGuinness Music on YouTube had his own take on this little sea shanty, and I really enjoyed hearing how he interpreted this. So please enjoy that, and we will be right back.
Reward for strains of Valhalla take. When horns resound the mighty hall, for those who fight, for those who fall, for those who fight, for those who fall. Warlord weaves his web of fear.
All right, kids, let's go literally the opposite direction in terms of tone, story, setting,
Duration and talking.
pretty much all of it from Assassin's Creed into my game for the week, which is Embracelet. Embracelet was released September 24th, 2020 for PC and Nintendo Switch, and it also got a mobile release on July 9th, 2021. And as far as I can tell when looking through things, those are still the only platforms on which it can be found. It does not seem to have come to PlayStation or Xbox quite yet. It was developed by Mattis Folkestad and published by Machine Boy, which is also just another name that Mattis Folkestad goes by. It is a 3D narrative adventure game where the player is put in control of a 17-year-old boy named Jesper.
Oh my God.
Yep. I've been waiting for that response, for that reaction all episode. It is a slow-paced, quiet, and emotional experience that is rather short, and I would say well worth your time if you enjoy sort of games like this. So the story of Embracelet is relatively simple. Jesper lives with his mother in a undisclosed Norwegian city. It doesn't say which one, it's just the city.
It might as well be Bergen at this point because, that's just tied to more of our composers. I'm sorry, anyway.
One day, Jesper's grandfather gives him a gift, which is a bracelet. And much to his surprise, there is more to this bracelet than meets the eye, because it just happens to also give him some form of mild telepathic abilities that allow him to manipulate the world around him. And alongside this gift, Jesper's grandfather also requests one thing, that he try and find where the bracelet came from and return it there. After his grandfather passes, Jesper decides to try fulfilling this request by traveling to where his grandfather grew up, the small island town of Slepp, which has seen better days as a result of large corporations sort of taking over the fishing industry that they rely on for survival. Jesper is set to spend a week in Slepp before returning to the city, and spends that week conversing with the townspeople, some of whom actually grew up with his grandfather, and he also quickly befriends the only two other teens on the island, a pair of cousins named Hermod and Carolyn. During this week, Jesper must dig into his grandfather's past, solve puzzles using the bracelet's powers, and decide how close he wants to get to his two newfound friends. Eventually, a wider mystery begins to unfold, and the origins of the bracelet go even farther than he originally thought. The game has multiple endings, different relationship outcomes with both Hermod and Carolyn, and a nice little mystery to solve as you go. So here is where I will ask, I'm going to change up the question. Peter, had you heard of Embracelet before I put it on the list?
I had not, but from what you described, it sounds like a pretty fun little time, and I'm curious.
Honestly, I think you would probably enjoy it. I found out about it from NWR's John Reardon, the site director over there, who did the review for the Switch version. And once he finished it, he actually, if I remember correctly, directly added me on Slack saying, hey, this is a Joe game. You should look into it.
It's nice when your tastes are known like that.
I mean, it also helps that the comparison he made was to the Moon. So,
okay.
There you go. As I alluded to earlier, Embracelet is entirely a one-man project. Folkestad handled the programming, modeling, sound effects, music, design, all of it. The whole shebang. All him. And he also handled some of the game's localizations. Specifically, he was the one that handled the Norwegian and English versions of the game. The rest of the available languages, of which there are quite a few, actually, were localized by the company Riot Lock. This was an expensive endeavor, apparently. One of the most expensive parts of the game, as far as I could tell, because the script for Embracelet is about 28,000 words long, which meant that all of those had to be translated and localized for each language. The game's art style, which is a low poly, sort of very simplistic look, it was kind of a choice both out of preference, because Folkestad said that he's a fan of that low poly style, but also kind of out of necessity, because Folkestad is one person, and he does not have the time or the resources to create photorealistic environments and characters. That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Reviewed generally well on release. It's got an 81 on Metacritic for the Switch, and the PC version has an 85. Most praise was given towards the game's setting, tone, and narrative, while a lot of critics conceded that the gameplay is rather simple, like very, very simple. Folkestad says he has ideas for his next game, but there are no firm plans at the time, at least not as of October 2020, which was when the interview that I got a lot of this information from was published, and that, at least at that time, he mostly wants to focus on trying to get the game on other platforms where it is currently not present, which I assume is what led to the mobile release. So let's talk about Mattis Folkestad. He is from Oslo, Norway. He grew up using the Commodore 64 and various Amiga computers to create multiple creative projects as a child, including learning programming and using that to make games. He also enjoyed music and drawing from a young age, which he honed as he grew up as well. He has a bachelor's degree in animation. He has made and released one other game, that being another adventure game called Milkmaid of the Milky Way, which came out in 2017. The plot summary for that game was a dairy farmer lady has to go save her cows when they are abducted by aliens, which sounds great.
It does. Wow.
I think I'm going to look into that game, honestly. Most of his skills in terms of game development are actually completely self-taught. He has no formal training in terms of computer science, programming. As far as I can tell, he doesn't have formal training in music. Like, he just taught himself all of this. He even essentially taught himself how to port his games onto consoles like the Switch. Games that have inspired his work overall, according to him, are Sacred Armor of Antiriad, which I've never heard of that one, but I have heard of the other two, being Another World and the first two Monkey Island games. And you can actually follow him on Twitter at MachineBoyCom. His discography is basically, as far as I could tell, the two games that he has released, being Milkmaid of the Milky Way and Embracelet. And I really couldn't find much about the soundtrack on its own. Generally, it's there are exceptions, obviously, but it's a very low-key soundtrack to fit alongside the very relaxed pace that Embracelet kind of has. It's got a lot of piano, it has some woodwinds in there, and it's just a generally nice listen. So let's get into how some of that sounds with critical track number 1. This is Windy Mountains. And this is essentially what I mean by low-key, sort of more relaxing in general. I did not have a chance to go replay this game. I didn't have time, but I was able to scrub through a long play, luckily, so I do know the general gist of where pretty much all of these songs play, and this one plays as you are hiking up a mountain with Hermod and Carolyn, because they want to show you their hangout spot, which is the top of said mountain, which has this really, really great view of the ocean and of the island and stuff. And so just sort of hanging out with these two people that you could, by the end of the game, end up extremely close to at least one of them, if not both, including romantic options for both of them, which is good. And this kind of reflects just the act of walking through nature with some friends and just sort of relaxing and talking. And I think it's very good.
Yeah, just gorgeous. I'm super impressed at this, self-taught music composition, because it's just really nice and relaxing. The piano, obviously, big here, but I can't help but get the feeling like if he had budget, like money to throw at, getting like live performances here, we could totally hear like Kristen Nygus here on what sounds like an oboe.
Oh, 100%.
And it would just be fantastic. But, these are really nice sounding instruments on the whole.
Yeah, woodwinds tend to work pretty well in MIDI form at the very least. So, that's good. It does sound very good. But yeah, Kristen Nygus on this song would be fantastic. I mean, Kristen Nygus on any soundtrack is fantastic, but you know what we mean. For critical track number 2, this is another one of roughly the same sort of tone. This is Mallory. So when I was listening through the soundtrack for the first time in a while, to sort of build this Critical 5, I hit this song and was like, Mallory. Who's Mallory? Who is Mallory? I don't remember a character named Mallory. And before I was reminded that the girl's name is Carolyn, I was like, is she Mallory? Is that what it is? Mallory is a boat.
Oh.
Mallory is a boat, and I only realized that while scrubbing through the log play and saw that this boat had the word Mallory written on the side. So Mallory is a boat specifically belonging to a bunch of people from an oil company that have shown up relatively unwelcomed to sort of survey the sea ground and see if there's, a place to build an oil rig maybe out here by this beautiful town that's falling apart. And people aren't happy about it. I don't know why it sounds so peaceful if it's essentially the boat that belongs to the closest thing this game has to an antagonist. But it's still a very pretty piece, so I still wanted to highlight it. And this is another one where, now that you mentioned it, I'm just going to keep hearing the idea of Kristen Nigas playing on this soundtrack. It just sounds good.
Yeah, beyond the clip, there's some clarinet there, and yep, could definitely hear that. I agree that it's like, yeah, if it's an antagonist boat, let's just say that, it is surprisingly calm. But at the same time, like, I don't hate the fact that, like, a soundtrack is primarily driven by piano like this.
Mm-hmm.
It also just amuses me the vast difference between Assassin's Creed big AAA budget soundtrack and then just really nice indie sound here. Just really big differences there, but both great.
Every time, baby, every time. That's what I do best, is wild tonal whiplash every episode of Original Soundchat. Next track of the Critical 5, Critical Track number 3. This one is connected to the origin of the bracelet. So, Critical Track number 3, this is Nadia and Leo. This is about the point where you are learning, like I said, the origins of the bracelet and how it kind of comes from a place pretty far away from Slep. If I remember correctly, Italy. But I'm not sure. The character that you are learning about, his name is Luciano, so I'm going to assume it's Italy.
Sounds pretty Italian, yeah.
But it's just this really, really interesting sort of out of left field moment where you are suddenly playing as somebody else and you are learning about their life and how they are connected to this bracelet and where it came from and all that. And this song has a bit of a different feeling to it, but not like so different that it doesn't fit on the soundtrack anymore. But I don't know, something about this track just feels very reflective, I guess, sort of, which fits for looking back at something that happened a long time ago in the past.
Yeah, I agree. It does sound like it's looking back on a memory. And I think the chimes, the vibraphone, whatever it's supposed to be representing there, kind of gives it that flashback feeling. So I think it does a really good job there with that.
Mm-hmm. Critical track number 4. This is the one that's going to change the tone up a little bit. This is going to be different from basically everything else we've heard. This is Chasing Mallory.
Well, now that we know Mallory's a boat, this has a whole different context.
So there's a boat chase in this game. It is great. Somebody at some point steals the bracelet. You gotta go get it back with your friends, and you chase said boat, Mallory, which, yeah, that sort of changed the context when I learned it was a boat. I expected something else. But this is, again, wild change in tone. This is now more action-oriented. It also sounds kind of piratey. I'm not going to lie.
Yes, 100%. I was thinking the same thing.
It has a very piratey vibe to it, which I find very amusing considering it is a boat chase. And I don't know, this one stood out to me a lot. I think this song is a lot of fun.
Probably because of the absence of piano, right? I mean, it's the cello and then woodwinds kind of playing the upper melody there, but when the strings get going, you're kind of like, oh yeah, there isn't piano here. So yeah, there's kind of an implied tension and heightened stakes.
Yeah. It's a fun, different piece, that you don't get a lot of this tone in Embracelet for the most part. I know you might, have been expecting an action-packed thriller based on my description of the game being super relaxed and laid back. But this is one of the few tracks that is like that. On to critical track number 5. This is actually my favorite song on the soundtrack, and probably my favorite moment in the game, because it's cute and nice, and both me and the long play I watched got this moment, which is not a moment that you will always get. I don't know if this song plays in the rest of the endings. I assume it does. But critical track number 5, this is Follow Your Heart. This is by far my favorite track in the whole soundtrack. For me, it had to do with Jesper realizing, oh wait, I don't want to leave this certain individual, and I need to go talk to them right now. Get me off this boat, and you run all the way to where they are, and this song plays the entire time that you are doing it. And it's just very cute, and I really, really dig this track a lot. I like the piano part, the build-up that it's doing for basically the whole song, and just the moment that it plays is one that that has stuck with me for a while. I really, really, really like this song.
Wow, that does sound really sweet. I get big To the Moon vibes from it, and kind of hitting like the emotional apex of the game. It's nice to have a piece like this that kind of just swells and soars and fills you with hope. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's a very, very hopeful, sweet, nice moment, and this song fits it perfectly. From there, we got 2 tracks on the cutting room floor. The first one is The Olsen House. One of the first things that Jesper does when he gets to Sleep is he starts looking for his grandfather's old house, which is still standing and has been essentially abandoned for decades at this point. And he does eventually find it. And this is the music that plays as you are sort of exploring it and looking at this window into your grandfather's youth, which is neat. And I think, again, this is another song that has that sort of reflective tone to it. But unlike Nadia and Leo, this one I think is more somber because it's about Jesper's grandfather, and Jesper's grandfather at this point in the story passed away like a week ago. So it's got some melancholy to it. And I think this song reflects it very well.
Judging what we know from the soundtrack so far, I think you're right. That's really good instrument choices, good mood here. I just almost wish he could find Mary-Kate and Ashley at the Olsen house, but alas, this seems to not be the case.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a different video game.
You gotta go to Paris for that one.
You think one day we'll talk about a Mary-Kate and Ashley game? No, we won't. I'm not even going to finish that joke because then it'll be seen as a promise. And the other track I have at the cutting room floor, this one's more here because I think it's funny to make a comparison. This is Sneaking. All right, Sly, it's time to start the heist. Like this, I can't listen to this song without hearing Sly Cooper in my head. That's the only place it goes in my brain. This song plays, as the name might suggest, when you are sneaking onto a boat. Specifically, you are sneaking onto the Mallory to check something. I don't remember what, but it's a fun moment of a stealth mission in this very narrative game. And this song just, I don't know, it tickles me that it sounds very much like something I would have heard in a Sly Cooper game.
It nails the sneaking feeling perfectly. So I gotta ask, Mattis, did you play Sly Cooper growing up? Because, yeah, wow.
I hope so. Because Sly Cooper is good and everybody should have played it growing up. So what will I never forget about Embracelet? It's a very nice game. I don't think I would put it quite on the level of To the Moon, simply because I hold that game in such high regard that it is an unfair comparison for me to make. But it is very enjoyable for a lot of the same reasons, honestly. It's really well written. The characters are a lot of fun and pretty memorable. And like I said, there's a lot of moments that have sort of stuck with me since I played it. It's also very short. It's like 3 hours at most.
Interesting. How long to beat has it between 4 to 5?
The long play that I watched was about 3 hours, and I want to say for me it took about 3 hours when I played it.
Okay.
Because I played it in one sitting, just sat down on the couch and blew through it in one go. Really worked well for that sort of session. And yeah, honestly, I would suggest if you like games like this, narrative, emotional stuff, you should look into Embracelet. Especially, I think you, Peter, would enjoy Embracelet a good amount. I think you'd find it pretty cute.
Yeah, color me interested. I think that if Mattis eventually can get Xbox publishing on board, it sure sounds like a great Game Pass game. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for that one. I'm definitely curious.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm part of me is surprised it's not on Game Pass, but also I'm not surprised because it's a very obscure game. Like, this is another one of those entries into Joe talks about a game him and 3 other people have heard of. But I do think that it deserves more attention than it got. This is another one of those games that doesn't even have a Wikipedia article. Like, it's that sort of under the radar, and I think it deserves a lot more than that. So, if anything I've said has sort of tickled your fancy, give it a look.
Well, then it's a good thing that we've paired Embracelet with another Norway-inspired game and another Norwegian composer with Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Einar Selvik. I think it's an interesting comparison between the two. Very different scopes, but I think it's fitting here on God of War Ragnarok Week that we talk about these games and we make that work. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at Pete Speakeasy. Joe is over at String Pixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, and that's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. It's where Joe's other podcast, Smasher Pieces, is hosted, and you can find Smasher Pieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Podcatchers all around the globe. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a podcast feed of episodes, but we also have a playlist where if we talk about a video game track on the show and it's on Spotify, it gets added to this big, huge playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
Both of these games are actually on Spotify, so they'll both be added. But not only that, just on a whim, I searched Layton on Spotify, and Curious Village, Unwound Future, and Mystery Journey are now on Spotify. None of the others, including Diabolical Box.
Weird.
Which is bizarre, but we have talked about Unwound Future and Mystery Journey both on this show, and so those are now on the playlist as well, and who knows, maybe another one might show up at some point later this year.
Stay tuned. When you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for us. Give us some suggestions for games to cover in the future. All good there. Couple weeks away from episode 200. So that's going to be exciting to cover the best of 2010s. And again, thank you for all of your input with that. We're really excited to get to recording that because the list has been made.
There's only one episode between now and then. Oh, geez. Ooh.
And I wonder what that theme will be. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I'll be talking about Takado Kitsuta.
And I'll be talking about Hideaki Kuroda. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
As this is an under-the-radar game, wasn't able to find any fan remixes or covers of it, which people should get on. Let's make it happen. So I'm going to use another track from the game. This one also plays during the flashback, the same one as Nadia and Leo. And I just find it to be a fun little song. This is Looking for Work, so please enjoy that.
Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.